So I'm here to talk about green infrastructure in general. Probably I should have been one of the first on, but we had to rearrange because of some other issues. But anyway, the idea is to set the scene, talk about green infrastructure, and specifically the why, the what, and the how, just as a way of organizing my thoughts. So just to introduce myself, I'm an ecologist interested in urban greening, and I'm fortunate enough to be involved in policy, strategy, but also detailed work as well. So, for instance, I was lead author of the Natural England's Green Infrastructure Guidance, which came out a couple of years ago now, but I also get involved in the green roofs, green walls, rain gardens, the details of it, design, troubleshooting, maintenance, and so on. So I'm fortunate in the sense I work from, very high level down to the detail, which is useful because often, you get people that specialize in policy or strategy who perhaps don't really know what that means in practice. So I'm quickly going to talk about the definition of green infrastructure. It's just the soil, water, and vegetation that you find in the urban environment, and it's the focus is on the benefits, the functionality nowadays. There's various definitions. There's always the talk about strategy and strategic and networks and multifunctionality. So those are the sort of things that the different institutes say about green infrastructure. And then we're hearing about nature-based solutions more and more now because, of course, everything is a solution, isn't it? If you start a business now, it's a solution. We'll talk about the problems. So we're solving urban problems with nature-based solutions, which is as natural as we can possibly make it. And of course, that's where the tension is, because most of the solutions to our problems are technological, they're built and so on. It is a city after all. So somehow switching over to a more natural approach is a struggle because it's counter to standard practice. Now, Natural England have got their framework, which I refer you to. You can go on their website and have a look at that. And there's the standards and then the principles. So I'm mainly talking about the principles this morning, but the standards are there to refer to. They're aimed mainly at local authorities and those that are deciding for us on these things, but it's worth knowing about this stuff. So every local authority will have its green infrastructure strategy, many of them being renewed. There's standards for accessibility to green space and ways of measuring that. It's quite technical, probably too complicated. But anyway, it's there, very difficult to implement. There's also the nature recovery strategies, which are now coming out because it's been suppressed for decades, or a decade or more. It's coming out again now. Your local authority will be working on that. There's 3 or 4 that are out now, which are worth looking at. Good examples. The urban greening factor, which was pioneered in Southampton and then adopted in London, copied from the continent. That's something that Natural England is encouraging to be rolled out. So that's about the percentage of greening that you would have in a development. It's not biodiversity net gain, it's just a guide to help people have greener developments. So that's interesting. And then urban tree canopy cover, which is a major initiative. We should all be aiming for at least 30% tree canopy cover. So that's just standards, not for today, but I wanted to quickly mention that. But I'm concentrating on the principles, the 15 principles, the why, the how, and the what. And I'm going to use some of my projects or projects I'm familiar with to perhaps illustrate those so we can rattle through this. So the why principles, if you like, are the benefits, I suppose. So why are we providing green infrastructure? Those are the reasons that Natural England focus on. And of course, we can do more for biodiversity, even in a very urban environment. So Dusty and I worked on this project where the client wanted the most biodiverse green roof in the UK. The design was probably not even going to be the most biodiverse green roof in Cambridge. So Dusty and I worked on a way of doing a bit more on that. Our next strategy, got to remember so active and healthy. All right, there's a lot of emphasis, isn't there, on exercise, park run, getting out and about. That's all good stuff, but also getting involved in the implementation of schemes is very good. Water sensitivity, sustainable urban drainage. So Natural England have reinforced that message in their guidance. And of course, now we've got the new standards out for sustainable drainage. And, you know, the big message there is sustainable drainage is not a bomb crater near a development where water ends up, which is what a lot of people think sustainable drainage is. Sustainable drainage should be more sophisticated than that, about source control, green roofs acting as sponges, swales, rain gardens. It's a sponge city that we want, not just a city with lots of great big holes where water could go in a storm. Sometimes you have to do that, but best to avoid it. And then the other thing is resilience. So heat waves, that kind of thing, flooding, of course. And, you know, more and more people are starting to understand the dramatic effect that trees, soil and vegetation has on shading and cooling. So this is much more than painting everything white to reflect the heat. This is evaporative cooling as well. So as water evaporates, transpires, it actively cools areas. So you get these incredible differences in temperature. So under the shade of a tree or in other dense vegetation, it might be ambient temperature. So on a hot day, 30-something degrees, it's nice and cool under the shade. Most people know that, don't they? But, you know, this is a stark reminder of the value of that. It saves lives. Green infrastructure saves lives in heat waves. And, you know, exposed surfaces are 60, 70 degrees centigrade potentially. So, you know, that's unbearably hot. So what should we be doing? It should be multifunctional. It should be varied. It's not the cut and paste the same thing everywhere, which is a tendency of modern life. You know, you find out how to do something, how to buy something. So you just keep buying the same thing as if it's a pizza, your favorite pizza or whatever. So we need to vary things. Connectivity is important, both for people and wildlife. It's got to be accessible because that's one of the standards. And we need to respond to local character, a bit more subjective, a bit trickier. Sometimes we don't even know what the local character is or was or should be. A big debate, but that's one of the principles. So multifunctionality means doing lots of different things at the same time, which is not the way we're schooled. We're schooled to specialize and do one thing at a time in different departments, different types of education. So this is a tricky one to achieve. But green infrastructure can make the sponge city. It can cool, it can clean the air, it can provide habitat and places to enjoy. So, and then the city starts to look a little bit different when it's multifunctional. Varied. So this is a project that I've been working on. This is Grosvenor Square, where it's a lawn under trees at the moment. And a lot of squares are in London. They weren't like that when they were set out 200 years ago. They were gardens, a lot of variety, a lot of gardeners, wooden wheelbarrows then, things were different. And now it's a lawn under trees. Lawns don't grow very well under trees. So the idea in Grosvenor Square is under the shade of the trees, you have woodland plants. You don't have to mow it anymore. You have paths, you'll have places for people to pause and so on. Okay, the central area will be a lawn, but perhaps we can have a species-rich lawn. So we vary it. It's going to be easier to look after. And of course, other squares might, you know, get the idea. So it won't just be posh squares that have this, all squares could have it. And then connectivity. This is Borden, Whitehill Borden Eco Town that I worked on a few years ago. You know, before the architects started laying everything out, you know, we really pushed the idea of a green loop, which is also for the dog walkers and people, but also for heathland wildlife, maybe, because there's lots of fragments of heathland. Maybe the parks could be heathy. I don't think I've won that argument. I suspect the parks are probably, I haven't been there recently, are probably more conventional than I would like, but that was the idea. You could have a heathland park, why not? Of course, the reality of on the ground isn't the same as the diagram that the landscape architect did with the fat pen, you know, with all the arrows and everything. But you know, at least that was thought through, and hopefully these approaches will catch on. And then accessibility for all kinds of people, all kinds of issues there. So Bedford River Valley Park, which is another one of my projects, it was about popping a few bridges in here and there so that the cycle paths start to link up. Suddenly it opens up the whole park. Suddenly the cafe at Danish Camp is popular, and so on and so forth. So that means that, you know, the places can become more prosperous through smart application of this. And then the responding to local character, as I said, I'm not really sure myself what this is, but this is up in Sunderland, where there were some historic buildings where with dereliction all around. And so that's a bit of a head scratcher for the architects and planners. What do we do? Obviously, they're not just going to build a row of historic churches, because the demand's fallen away for that. But, you know, what do you do? And, you know, fortunately, there are some parks that have gone into those sites, which, you know, the designers were, you know, looking into what used to be there. I think there was years ago, there was a monastery or something, you know, the planting. So, you know, arguably responding to local character. I mean, obviously there's a lot of, there could be a whole conference on this, and I wouldn't be speaking at it because I don't understand it. But anyway, that's one of the principles. So how do we do it? We need to really know where we're going. You need partnerships, which, you know, this is obviously a good example here. You would have heard a lot about that. We need to look at the evidence, strategic planning, which your local authority have been thinking about that, so you should tap into that process, but you need your own strategies. Design, of course, and then managed, valued, and evaluated. This is one principle, but it's three principles in one. And actually, these are some of the most important ones. Maybe if Natural England could have gone to 8 principles on this, that would have been even better. But at least we've got that in there. So, you know, if you've got strategy, policy. So this is Swansea. Dusty and I introduced urban greening factor, which meant buildings needed greening. Then you've got some interesting developers who are curious and wanted to know, you know, what could that mean? Then you've got housing association that were saying, yeah, we would like social housing in your building. So what was Woolworths, I was trying to remember. Woolworths hasn't been demolished, 3 stories, reinforced concrete, 12 towers in total, allotments, wildlife gardens, green balconies, social housing, 3 floors of greenhouses, PV, solar, biosolar. So everything's been thrown at this, and it's going to be looked after. There's going to be training schemes for maintenance, and then that will form the core of community-owned companies that then manage all this other stuff in Swansea. So, you know, that's what you want, really big ideas, visionary, joined up. The evidence is there. There's piles of evidence for all this stuff. The evidence, the mapping evidence is there. The evidence of the benefits, it's the stacks of it. So hopefully we're past this, there's no evidence, which is what we used to hear all the time. Plan strategically. I think this must be this is Essex, South Essex. I'm in the right place for a change. So Alexandra Steed, who's a landscape architect, was commissioned to do the strategic green infrastructure, blue-green infrastructure plan. I was supporting that process in the background, and it won an award for being climate smart, which was because we actually addressed it. You know, unfortunately, sometimes these things, they're on the first page, and then you think, well, where is that in the plan? So the plans are out there. And then design. So, you know, the details, the detailed design, going to people that know how things work. These are rain gardens. So this is Eastcote in northwest Hillingdon, northwest London. So I was fortunate to work on the first phase, which was you could have rain gardens here, which is not an easy phase because apparently you can't. But anyway, we managed to get that on the agenda, and then others came in and did the detailed design, and now it won an award with the Landscape Institute, which means that other people are now taking it seriously because we love awards. So, although of course that, but you know, you can win awards with this stuff. I don't know if there's people that like awards. So, if you just do business as usual, you can still win an award, but it's easier to do this sort of stuff. And then the managing and the valuing, you know, I'll let John say more on that, but you know, at least it's in there. And this is a Bankside business improvement district. You know, we had this usual thing. Who's going to look after it? We got the money to build it. Who's going to look after it? The council, Southwark Council. Oh well, the clean streets can't touch that because that's plants. We only sweep up, so we can't touch the litter. Once the litter's in the vegetation, that's parks. Parks say that's not a park. It's a little planter in the street. You know, so you get that issue. Then it's volunteers. Then it's office workers in their lunch break. Then it's, yeah, we could have apprentices here. We can train people. It's actually a really enjoyable job. So, you know, they're cottoning on to this stuff. And then monitoring, you know, we're very poor at that. There's never a budget. Of course, it should be done by experts with clipboards, people like me being paid a lot to go around and check everything. But of course, that's unaffordable. So we're going to have to be smart with our monitoring. So this is an example, Gentian, which is a satellite and AI company that can you know, watch these things from afar. But of course, we can even do it with AI and cameras and microphones and you know, to supplement. And if there is a period when we can't send experts out or even work with citizen scientists or whatever it is, we've got that record there automatically in a cost-effective way. So that is 20 minutes.